Welcome to all you storm watchers, storm chasers, and Leanierologists out there. Welcome to another edition of Tempest Talks, where we discuss lean philosophy, principles, and tools, and how they impact our personal and professional lives. Today, we will be discussing dealing with failure with my good friend, Elaina Carpino. By way of introduction, Elaina is Luma Institute's Chief Operating Officer. In this role, Elaina supports a culture of accountability, transparency, inclusivity, operational excellence, and empowered decision-making, as well as other responsibilities that she has. She has more than 20 years of experience driving transformational change in high-performing teams and organizations. Her specialty is helping people see their potential and realize their personal and professional goals through behavioral changes that bring out the very best in them. That's one of the reasons why we connected so well. Elaina has held leadership roles with Dow Chemical, Nationwide Insurance, Owens Corning, and Tesla, which is where we met. Her business expertise includes manufacturing, supply chain, operations, strategy, and talent development, and product commercialization. She holds degrees in chemical engineering and business operations excellence from The Ohio State University. She is a certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, holds 3 application patents for advanced insulation technology and installation, and serves on the board of Buckeye Engineering Women in, in Executive Leadership. And is it pronounced Be Well?
It is pronounced Be Well.
I love it. That's for the Ohio State University College of Engineering, which is super cool. Elaina received executive leadership training from the University of North Carolina, is a graduate of the International Coach Academy, and is a certified ACC professional coach through the International Coach Federation. Have I missed anything?
No, not at all, Michelle. And quite frankly, let's just get on with this conversation because it's such a joy to be with you. And we have so much to talk about lean and failure and how do we like really lean into that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So much to chat about. Thank you for this. Really, I've been so looking forward to it.
Likewise, thank you. I know you're a very busy individual, and I'm so excited to hear what you have to say. I think it's going to be amazing. So when I say dealing with failure, what's the first thing that you do?
Oh, you know, let's put it this way. At times, you feel like you want to run and hide, right? You feel like failure,
gosh,
like
yes.
It's just the emotion that overwhelms you of like, what did I do? You know, right? You always get like, for me, I always go internally, like I'm reflective of like, how did I fail? What did I do wrong? Right?
Yeah.
And then you take this bit of like looking around and saying, you know what, it's not me per se, but maybe it's the perceptions and it's the behaviors by which that failure had happened. And I really look at it through a lens of how do you flip it? How do you reframe it? Of rather than that failure happened to me, but maybe it happened for me. And
Yeah.
it through a different lens.
I like that. So it's kind of like, what can I benefit from this layoff or from being laid off?
Exactly. You know, and I can remember such a time where it was actually with Owens Corning, where I was going through. We were going through some significant changes as a company. This would have been right at the housing bubble, 15 years ago. Hard to believe, going back in terms of time.
Right.
But I can remember being with the leader at the time, who had a conversation with me about just my own performance that I had. And I was leading a global organization for IT and was new in my role, new to the IT organization, new to like something global and large, but also new in terms of people leadership as well. Yes, I had led people in operations, but leading, a group of individuals that are knowledge workers and thought workers is a bit different.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I can remember that performance review conversation because it kind of caught me by surprise that I was not performing well. And I actually was faithful. And I looked at it reflective of the sense of like, gosh, what did I do? What could I have done differently? How could I have led differently? And I have to tell you that failure taught me so much about leadership in a sense of,
Hmm.
what will I do differently next time? How will I, be in service of my team and be
Wow.
able to, be there for them in a bigger way? And, through that, that whole change, which again, I think it happened for a reason. It
Mhm.
happened right at a time where maybe I wasn't ready for it, frankly, that I wasn't quite
Yeah.
ready for that people leadership and big accountability. But I have to tell you that through that whole change, it made me really think about like what's important and putting your team, in places where they can thrive and trying to, help them through that change. So I think even just from an own personal failure, that
Yeah.
it was pretty difficult, but being able to see that from the other side was important.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's how can I make a difference next time? Very, very
Exactly.
healthy way to look at it.
Exactly. Exactly. Because again, sometimes that's, when you're going through that change, you don't see the forest through the trees. You don't
Yeah.
see,
True.
what's happening around you. And frankly, I think, even as a female leader, and sometimes at times, it's hard to ask for help. I've
Oh
learned
yeah.
that I call it confident vulnerability, that in our
Hmm.
own way of leadership, that actually asking for help is probably a big source of strength. That it's not
Yeah.
about fight. It's really about how do you look through that change through a different lens for not only yourself, but the teams that you're trying to build and grow. And to really be able to say, you know what, I guess what I really did screw up there, but
Yeah.
here's the thing. I learned from it, and not to say that maybe I won't do it again, but maybe I'll do it differently next time
Mm.
through a different perspective because of that experience. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think, failure is just like one of those things where it's like, oh, kind of, it feels like it hits you in the gut. It feels like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, what had just happened to me? But you really got to take a step back and honestly take a deep breath too, because it might be happening for you.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Take a deep breath, stop. I used to always tell the team at Tesla that, that we worked with, I'm like, my gosh, we're going 100 miles an hour. We never take a moment to breathe. And when big things would happen operationally or, even in any of my organizations that I worked with, big problems came up. Um, I would have to remind myself, stop, don't panic, like
Exactly.
breathe.
Exactly. And, and it's so important that that whole notion of like slowing down to speed up, because,
Yeah,
which again, pun intended around Tesla and speed, right? We'd love to be that
right.
fast. We love to like, break barriers and new paradigms, right?
Yeah,
But there's this notion of like being methodical and, breaking it down to the fundamentals of like what's really true and what's really important. And I think that's true even of failure. Is like what is true, just
yeah.
really quoting by Katie and her book on the work. Like she
Oh
asked some
yeah.
fundamental great questions around, and they're just so basic. Is it true?
Huh.
Is it really true? Right? Like when you think about failure and when it's happening, like
Yeah.
again, you just feel like everything around you is just like, I don't know, like it just exploded, so to speak. But then when
Mm.
you break it down and you say like, okay, what was really true about that? And take
Mm.
that deep breath and slow down and really look at it through the fundamentals, then you ask yourself like, okay, now I understand a bit of the root cause. Now I can
Yeah.
see the behavioral side of this, the emotional side of this,
Yeah.
try to look at it through a logical sense and saying, okay, how might I approach this differently the next time?
Yeah, for sure. And would you say those are good coping mechanisms too?
Yes, it is because, as a coach, one of the
Yeah.
things that I always love to teach clients is the fact that, what, the client is the expert, and you as a
Mhm.
coach, you're coming in with that curiosity and creating the space for
Yeah,
people to create their own awareness.
I
And
like
I
it.
think even for ourselves, as we go through our own leadership failures and what those are, like what's the awareness that you have for yourself, and just simply taking a breath, taking that pause, and almost like you're taking a step back before you go forward, so to speak. And
Yeah.
and it, and I think what that does is it's, think of it as like an archer, or as, somebody that's taking a step back with their bow and arrow, right?
Yeah.
Really, pausing before you really let go
Yeah.
and to see what's in front of you.
I like that.
And I think what's also important about embracing failure is that letting go piece, which is so hard.
Yeah.
Because another coping mechanism that I like to take is, and this is, I mean, again, this is really hard. Like, how do you go back and reflect and forgive yourself for
Yeah.
that you were in? Almost a sense of surrendering and looking
Mhm.
at it at through that, again, that optimistic, different lens of it was happening for me. And
Mhm.
because of that, I can look at it in a different light
Yeah.
and be able to let go, kind of like you're letting go of that arrow.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because I love that analogy because it's really, you're pulling back on the bow and you're refocusing a little bit as you do
That's
that as
right.
well, and then let go. You're absolutely right. The letting go piece, I think, is the hardest for most of us. Um, especially if you're dealing with a project that you've been working on for like a year and a half,
Oh my gosh.
and then all of a
Exactly.
sudden it epically fails. Like, what do we do? Like, how do you recover from that? It's really, really hard.
It, it is hard, but I think when you look back and you say, be reflective, right? I think that's the other coping mechanism of this is really around, again, it's awareness, it's about stepping back and pausing, but also being reflective of what did really go wrong, right? And again, breaking
Yeah.
down those fundamentals. And then I think you'll be surprised that oftentimes it could be your own perspective of how you're looking at the change at the time, how you're looking at the project that you're trying to launch. You know, I can even think of, sometimes with new product commercialization and,
Yeah.
time at Owens Corning and trying to lead a new product to market. And, we were so optimistic about trying to go against a pretty big competitor in the space that was doing some great things.
Yeah.
And at the time, with fiberglass, we were trying to do something fundamentally different with
Hmm.
contractors. And while there were
Amazing.
some failures in that process, in that commercialization, I think stepping back, we could say, you know what? One of the key stakeholders was X, Y, and Z.
Hmm.
What could we think about differently when we enroll them? Because they're a huge part of that value chain. So I
Yeah.
think that being reflective allows you to see like what precise little areas along that way, could you have done differently?
Yeah. Well, and do you think, some problem solving methodologies? Because being a Six Sigma black belt, we're
Right.
very familiar with the DMAIC process, right?
Oh, yes.
Do those types of methodologies really, help kind of refocus as well?
So this is where, coming full circle back to Luma Institute. So thinking about, thinking about Luma and design thinking and human-centered design. What I love about the Luma system in conjunction with DMAIC is the fact that you take the human side and you underpin it to DMAIC, a problem-solving approach,
Awesome.
right?
Very
And
cool.
and when you look at something like FMEA, right, your failure mode and effects analysis, what I love about that process is it really helps to take the subjectivity out and to look at something through objectivity. And I think
Awesome.
failure, that's so important, right? Because it's so easy to get, wound up into the emotional side of this
Oh,
and
so
the
easy.
behaviors, right? And,
Yeah.
and when you look at it through a FMEA, then you can start looking at it objectively and then underpin that with something like, the Luma system with things such as abstraction laddering. Okay, well, why did that happen? How did that happen? Or maybe even thinking about, a problem tree analysis, which is
Cool.
also similar to, Fishbone or Ishigawa, right? So I
Yeah.
think, when you couple these, the system of Luma, which is an acrostic for looking, understanding, making, as well as adapting. When you couple
Ah.
that with DMAIC, then I think you could see a full picture of, how do you really look through that lens of failure and
Mhm.
both the human side, but also the problem side of what you're trying to solve.
Yeah. Do you think it's been more of a driving force for most organizations because you work with lots of different organizations? Do you think the behavioral side has become more of an interest to them in understanding that versus, generic problem solving or lean?
I think it's when you couple both, people
Couple them
start to have
together.
the power and through any change, take Pro C AdCard, for example, infamous change management process, right? even Cotter and Cotter's,
Yes.
methods of change. I think when you couple that with like true problem solving techniques,
Hmm.
power them together, because then when you look at the behavioral side of change
Yeah.
and the human side of change, and then even with the emotional side of change, there's an organization called Change Enthusiasm Global, led by founder and CEO Cassandra Worthy, that is just phenomenal. That I
Awesome.
think you take those together, it's incredible what you can do with the power of emotion, with behavior, and with problem solving. Because I don't think in today's society, especially when we're dealing with a VUCA world with so
Yeah.
much change happening around us,
So
that
much.
oftentimes, I think, go back to, APQP and TQM and some of these others. I don't think we've spent a lot of time on the human side of it.
Agreed.
And I think this is where, again, bolster that with lean, bolster it with DMAIC, and, behavior side of change, whether it's ProCADCAR, whether it's the system, whether it's, change enthusiasm with emotions. I think that's where you get the power of it all.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, and of course, with the global pandemic, which was a big problem.
Right.
Yeah, with that, it totally changed the way we looked at work in general. Um, and the behavioral side of things, I don't know if you've seen this as well, but we've seen an uptick in mental health issues in
Yeah.
most organizations. They just they don't know how to cope. Some of these employees, be them young, old, whatever, they're having a hard time separating their personal lives from their work lives. And we know each other pretty well. You know that I find that we bring our whole selves to work. So
Right.
whatever we're dealing with at home, we're going to be dealing with during the workday and vice versa. And so we bring that emotional aspect into whatever group that we're working with. And so in my mind, we really do need to be talking more about behavioral type things. And I'm hoping most organizations are recognizing that as well. Are you finding difficulty in that, that messaging for that?
I think with certain organizations,
Mm.
that we're finding that there are some that are really leading the way, and we want to ride on their coattails. We want to understand, who are the pioneers in this space that are really
Cool.
out there, and just almost as if they're bringing the company, if you will, is bringing their whole selves to work, and
Yeah.
really expressing themselves. Because this whole notion about mental health that you talk about, it is a real issue,
Yeah.
especially today, when the lines, like you said, the lines are blurred between
Yes.
and life, right? It's just life. There is no work per se, because
Yeah.
you can't, you walk outside of your den, bedroom, wherever you are, and here you're at home now, right? And
Yeah.
the fact that, hey, the kiddos, if for those that have kids, are going to be, maybe doing a little bit of like a, drop into your Zoom session, or your
Yeah.
cat's so we're all of a sudden, like, I feel like we're becoming more equitable, in the sense that you kind of see folks in this 2D box, and
Oh,
everyone's
yeah.
on the same playing field. And I think this is where the power of understanding behaviors, understanding, meeting people where they are, like, hey,
Yeah.
check in with folks. Like, one of the
Yeah.
things that we adopt now that Luma is part of Mural is we do like these great warm-up activities in the first 5 minutes of any meeting. And it could be
Cool.
something as, and you'll appreciate this from a Leanbrella perspective, like, hey, where are you on the scale from a temperature perspective? Are you
Yeah.
ice cold right now? Are you warm and hot? Like, where are you emotionally coming into this
Yeah.
meeting? And
That's
we try to
cool.
do some fun things, just like open it up so that everyone is like in the game, getting ready to have a meeting. And then we're looking to infuse some of the Luma
Wow.
methods inside of what we do from a problem solving standpoint, but also bringing in some of Mural's, system of methods as well. So I
Yeah.
fully suspect that, bring in, a 5Y, or bring in,
Yeah.
a fishbone diagram for whatever meeting that you're doing. But I think this whole notion of mental health is so important. And what I love about doing, virtual kind of sessions, again, is it just kind of, makes it equitable and helps to
Yeah.
create an even playing field, so to speak, for everyone involved, regardless of who you are in the organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I love the fact that there's this like transition to make this happen in organizations, because the culture of the organization is so important. And if we aren't focusing on those things, then we're going to lose loyalty. We may have a decrease in the culture of the organization, and nobody's going to want to join the business. I think they forget that sometimes. Some of the industries businesses forget that culture really is what attracts people to your organization. And if you don't have a good culture for that organization, don't expect to have a lot of applicants, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. And Michelle, what I love about culture, and this is something that, I've learned to embrace even in my own practice with Change is Heart work, is that, what really is culture? Well, culture is behavior over time. And I
Yeah.
like to layer in, against the engineer in me. So of course I don't want to
Right.
formula, but I love to layer in purpose inside of that as well. Because, we've been talking about behaviors. And if you think about what behaviors are a culmination of a subset of habits. And if,
Mhm.
if you look at like James Clear and Atomic Habits and the compounding effect of just 1% every day of whatever it is that you're doing,
Yeah,
that can really help be the recipe for building good culture, right?
totally.
Create those habits, create those behaviors that you can build a culture. However, you can have the best behaviors in the world, but if you don't have a shared purpose, and what a
Yes.
shared purpose is, to reference Change Enthusiasm Global about Cassandra and how she thinks about what purpose really is a set of beliefs. And
Mhm.
what are beliefs? Well, beliefs are, again, similar to behaviors,
Yeah.
like a compounding effect of thoughts that you have over time.
Yeah.
So if you have shared beliefs and you're crisp on what those are, then you have a
Yeah.
shared purpose. And with that shared purpose and the right behaviors and recipe, you can create the right culture.
I love
So
it.
as you think about organizations of like, oh, this is not a good culture fit. Well, let's think about their purpose. Like what
Yeah.
are their shared beliefs? What are the behaviors? What do they live by? What are the principles? Right?
I love that.
I think when companies really distill those down into some really salient points, then you can start asking like, okay, maybe this is the right culture for me. Like at
Huh.
Neural, one of the ones that I love, which is so valid right now, is this notion of adapt to thrive.
Ah, cool.
And if you think about the word adapt, which is about changing,
Yep.
being enthusiastic about that change for thrive. I mean, it's funny how it all kind of comes full circle
Yeah,
here.
it's full circle.
So I think, again, looking at culture and what it means and organizations like what they can do, again, break it down to fundamentals, behavior
Oh,
over
yeah.
time, belief, and compounding effect of beliefs as well.
Yeah, I like it. It's almost like a methodology like Lean can organize how the behavioral aspect of the business is
Yes.
functioning. So
Yes.
like I think about the most successful organizations in terms of culture as well as, their in market kind of thing. The ones that I was a part of, the ones that were most successful, had certain principles, and most of them were lean, but principles put in place like Hoshin Connery. So they had policy deployment, which would
Yes.
align everybody in the right direction. And then they would have a behavioral aspect to it as well, but it would be guided through some form of tool. So it would be root cause analysis, like Ishikawa, like you were talking about. So it's our behaviors may be structured in a lean manner, but what it's doing is it's actually changing our behavior and how we think about problems and how we solve them.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the beauty of that, Michelle, is the fact that, even just, at the highest order level of lean, right? Plan, do, check, act. What's
Yeah,
beautiful about that, the whole PDCA, is the fact that that is in and of itself about behavior change. And it is
totally.
about getting the organization,
Yeah.
through Hoshin Connery, as you talked about, like moving in the right direction.
Mhm.
But it doesn't have to be, so rigid fast that
Yes.
people can't
Yes.
have the change or can't, be their fully expressed selves. So I
Yeah.
think when you apply plan, do, check, act, as a way of driving that behavior change,
Yeah.
and then having the strategy development through things like Hoshin Kanri, and being able to instill those problem solving techniques like Ishikawa and five whys. Those kinds of things, those help to reinforce the behaviors, which then reinforce the culture that you're trying to create.
Which is so cool. Have you been into any organizations that maybe don't do lean type methodologies, but they function very well? Their culture is really good. Have you noticed that they're maybe doing lean without realizing it?
Yes, exactly. I call it the Jedi mind trick, right? It's like you're doing it without doing it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think, if there is organizations that are doing it, oftentimes, it might be, they may not be realizing it, but when then you call it out, you're like, oh, well, this is just our operating system. This is our operating model. And exactly. It's like you don't have to be so prescriptive around what it is, but here are the traits of it. Here's what we're seeing as evidence that you're living by those principles. That's all it is.
Cool.
It's an operating model of principles that you're applying in your daily work. Yeah, so I think there certainly are organizations that I've run across that aren't living by the quote unquote like lean prescriptive methodology.
Yeah.
But doing it without realizing they're doing it. And that's pretty
Love
cool. Like when you come in, you're like, oh, you are doing this. It's like, oh, didn't realize I was. Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Well, and I almost wonder if those of us that have been doing Lean Six Sigma for a while now, I wonder if those kinds of behaviors happen naturally for us or more naturally. And so I'll give an example. So like recently I was putting together a training and I was struggling with it because it was our problem solving methodology, for instance, and I was struggling with it for a couple days because I was like, this should be like common sense for folks. How do I put common sense in a PowerPoint presentation to train people? Right? So I was like, and then I realized I actually do this naturally. Like I don't think as it being a step process anymore. And it made me think back to the organization where I really learned lean. It was part of their DNA. It was part of how they behaved. So we didn't really talk about a step process to find root cause. We didn't talk about, Ishikawa as being, our number one step, or five whys being our number one step. We didn't talk about that. We just did it.
Right. And I think, it's funny that you say that, because maybe it's just for those that are innate in how they think of problem solving.
Yeah.
Right? And if you think about like what really is problem solving, well, you're going from a state of like current state to future state, right? You're going from a state of discontent to content, or disconnect to connect, right? It's always like basically something that you're dissatisfied with to a state of satisfaction. And you don't have to overthink it. And that's just it. Like, people probably realize they're more problem solvers, more so than they're not. And that's your everyday work. When you get up and you're like, you know what, I've got to be at work by 9 a.m. Okay, so how am I going to solve that problem to get to work by 9 a.m.? Because the outcome is you want to be there on time. You want to be there and ready. Well, you're solving a problem by getting ready in the morning. What are the things that you need to do, the steps to get there? What are the choices that you're making in order to get from waking up to getting ready to be on a Zoom call by that time, right? So I think people probably doing this every day without realizing they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And for some, does it happen naturally? Maybe not. That's okay, because it can't be taught.
Yeah.
Why can it be taught? It's about behavior change.
Yeah.
And what is it about behavior change? You're instating new habits, new ways of thinking, new ways of working, new ways of doing, new ways of being.
Yeah.
Even.
So how would you coach a leader, who maybe has a very difficult team that's trying their very best? They're just missing the mark all the time. So they're consistently failing. How would you coach them to not give up? And what kinds of coping skills would you teach them?
Yeah, oh, this is a good question because, I think with teams, especially with leaders that, first of all, self-awareness, I think is the biggest thing, right?
Mhm.
And really coaching them through to see like what is what is really failing? How
Yeah,
are you measuring that failure?
yeah,
Is it a project that's not going well? Okay, well, describe not going well. What does that mean to you? So I think by coaching them, it's just to me, it's about asking the right questions, being curious, and
oh,
helping
good.
them to solve their own problem.
I
Because
like it.
I bet they know what the answer is, and they just need some guidance to kind of pull them through it. And if they're continuing to fail,
Mhm.
then the question becomes, is it really the process or is it
Mhm.
really the person?
Oh,
And if it's
yeah,
the person, is it me not setting up the right expectations for them? Am I not being clear enough around
I
the
like that.
expectations of them and their role? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Feels like I've done that. Are they understanding what those expectations are? And then are they delivering those expectations to their team? And then how are they measuring that? How are they what are the leading indicators to know if something's failing? Do they have those mechanisms in place?
I
But
like it.
again, I think it's really about, being curious, helping them to solve their problem, helping them to create the awareness, and
Yeah.
just asking what, simple things like, what does failure mean to you? Well, what do you
Mm.
mean it's not going well? What does well look like for you?
Mm.
Quoting Brene Brown, paint
Yep.
for me what good looks like. Okay,
Yeah.
great. That's your outcome. Then that's your measurable. Live up to that. Share that vision with your team. And
Yeah.
I think just again, just asking those open-ended questions to help them solve it. Because it shouldn't be me solving for them. Because
Right.
they're learning nothing. They'll learn nothing. And that's, and I think that's the notion of leadership at times. And it's hard. Trust me, it's hard. I am not perfect at this. And my
Oh,
team knows
no,
that.
me either.
But I'm willing to call myself out, be like, look, call me out on it. Let's work
Yeah.
together on this. But truly, frame it back to them. Ask the questions and
Yeah.
help guide them through so they can solve it.
I love that. And making them problem solvers. I love that you mentioned that too, because that's where their growth and development comes into play.
Exactly.
I can always peg, and I'm sure you can too. I can always peg a ineffective leader if they're solving everybody else's problems or holding things too close to the chest and not letting their teams solve the problems. Um, that doesn't help anybody. It just burns out the leader. It doesn't create growth in their team, doesn't allow their team to really stretch their wings, if you will, and rise to their potential at all. And it just takes a special kind of person to recognize their own failure in the situation.
It takes a special kind of person, and sometimes they may not even be aware. And I think that's
Yeah,
where a
that's
good
true.
leader comes in to help them be aware and help them to, have like those real heart-to-heart conversations, be like, hey, you're so close to getting this, right? So let me share with you an observation. Here's what I'm observing. And
Yeah,
don't make it about what you see versus about pointing it back to them per se, so
yeah,
that they can bring it. And, I think that's the oftentimes, I love what you said about how certain leaders like sometimes keep things close to the vest because maybe they're afraid to let
yeah,
their team. How do
yeah,
you know until you let it go? Right?
yes,
So hard with leadership to say, like, you know what? I have to let go. I have to trust the fact that this individual, this team is going to deliver these results. I'm
yeah,
going to be there for them and I'm going to teach them how to fish. I'm going to teach them how to be problem solvers and
yeah,
ask the right questions. And if that person on their team does fail, at least they can go back and say, you know what? I gave them the environment, I gave them the expectations.
yep,
I didn't do it for them because you're actually, like you just said, you're not doing them any service. It's not serving you as a leader,
yeah,
and you're not helping them grow. And
yeah,
and it's so hard to do. It's so hard to do
yeah,
that again, surrendering and letting go, even as leaders, to let others fail, but allow them to make that great lesson learned for themselves.
yeah, for sure. Well, and do you think that personality or belief systems play into, someone's ability to cope with failure?
Ooh, belief systems, yeah, and
Yeah.
personality. It it can, look, I am not a psychologist by any stretch of the words. Okay,
I'm not either.
but I think, but if you go back and you think about like your your family dynamics,
Yeah.
right? And to kind of pull some of this into it. So I'm a middle child, but I have a sister that's 10 years older than me. And then my
Oh,
brother and I are like 14 months apart. So we're like Irish twins. So
oh
in
my
some
goodness.
aspects, yeah. So in some aspects, it's kind of like I feel like an older sister to him, but like he almost has two older sisters, but technically in the
Yeah.
pecking order, I'm in the middle. So there's a tendency to what to play, diplomat because of being
Oh,
middle child, but
yep.
also there's a tendency of being protective, right? Like
Of
protective of
course.
siblings,
Yeah.
yeah, or what have you. And I know my sister is the same, like she's protective of us depending on things. But I think, if you look at like those behaviors and the belief systems, that maybe how you grow up could have something to do with that. Because I look at
Yeah.
my brother and me, and unfortunately, we lost our mom at a very early age, and we had to learn to
Oh,
kind of grow up early.
wow.
But it was, we learned how to be together. We learned how
Mhm.
to, rely on family. And I'm so
Yeah.
grateful to have an amazing partner and wife that we've
That's
been together for nearly
awesome.
30 years. But I think there's something about, you know, inherent in belief, and I kind of touched on this a little bit, is, again, it's a compounding effect of thoughts, that just occur over time. And those
Yeah.
thoughts are things in your own head,
Yeah.
whether they're true or not true. The only thing that is true is right now, the
Yes.
present.
Yes.
The past happened, and what
Yep.
happened in the past was your perspective. What happens in the future hasn't happened yet. You can think about what it is, you can
Yeah.
envision what it is, but it hasn't happened yet. So the only beliefs that you have, beliefs of thoughts,
Or
of things,
now.
it,
Wow.
beliefs of thoughts that happened past, but the only thing that's true is now.
Mm.
So I think, when you look at behaviors, when you look at change, and you look at what you can do, it, control what you can control in
Yeah.
that moment. And that moment is now. And
Yeah.
it's amazing how, again, just thinking about family dynamics and how that plays into that, pecking orders and such. But I also think that you just at times, because of that perspective, we're human,
Yeah.
and it's the human condition that
Totally.
really comes into play, that
Yeah.
sometimes clouds our beliefs, or clouds,
Mm.
do we have the personality for it?
Yeah.
And I think if you look at it through a healthy perspective of what can I control, what's real, what's present, what am I aware of, then I think that, can help you through whatever
Yeah.
failure it is. Look at it as an opportunity. It's
Yeah.
happening for me, not to me.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the hardest part. Oh my goodness. I thankfully have never been part of a layoff. Um, but I have several, friends who have been part of a layoff, and that's a really difficult situation. And it's hard to think about this, this is happening for me because it feels like the world is against you at that point in time, especially when you're the sole provider for your family unit, whatever that looks like. And you lose your job, it's panicking, and can be quite debilitating for people. Um, and then, of course, the pandemic changed things for people as well. So we're seeing that increase in mental health also. Um, I just wonder if we as organizations need more folks like yourself coming in and teaching us about behaviors and healthy ways of behaving and interacting with others. And having, I think it's called radical candor, um, having radical candor with our peers as well as our leadership, because we can manage up
Right.
as well. Having those relationships to help us overcome stuff like that. Um, so with the layoff situation, what kind of advice would you give somebody that may be, struggling with that right now?
Ah, I mean, I'm so glad you asked this question because I'm so empathetic for so many, and I know, like you know, of so many, even people of which I've been in direct contact with here at various companies, and
Yeah.
it's difficult, especially for the not only for the recipient, which is so difficult to hear that news because it's coming out of nowhere for them, and they're blindsided.
Yeah.
But even for someone who's delivering it, because as somebody who is I try to strive to be a heart-led leader and be very empathetic. It's
Yeah.
difficult in those situations, and I think by keeping it real, by keeping it to the point of like, look, this was nothing that that individual had done,
Yeah.
that it really is the business. And oftentimes, at the end of the day, it's either market conditions, which there's so
Yeah.
many market conditions that are influencing how things are, especially in the tech world, with
Oh
the
my
companies that
gosh.
we've all
Yes.
become, right? But even at the end of the day, it's leadership too.
Yeah.
Leadership needs to be making the right decisions so
Agreed.
that we don't have to go through this. And
Right.
and I was fortunate enough prior to joining Luma, where the company said, look, we're taking a stance and we're not letting anybody go at the result of the pandemic. We're going to figure out like how we change things on a dime, going from
Mhm.
in-person to virtual, and
Yeah.
we're able to take advantage of the situation. My hope is that more companies can do things like that, really lean into their employees to help them
Yeah.
solve those problems.
Me too.
Gravity payments is one that you always hear about. Great. I'm terrible remembering the names. But the CEO of the company had done some incredible things, even before the pandemic, to make sure that look, I don't believe in layoffs. I don't believe in I will take myself, a significant pay cut so that people don't, aren't let go. So I
Yeah.
think that even as leaders, we've got some tough calls to make of ourselves, that
Totally.
it takes people to do the things that we need to. And when it comes to those layoffs, again, we don't know, the market conditions that are changing those things.
Yeah.
But I think for those that are impacted by it, please, I would ask each of you, take advantage of finding a coach, asking the employer
Yes.
who let you go to see if they can help you with resources to get you a coach, because they will really help you. And the beauty of coaching, which is one of the primary reasons why I went towards coaching, is it's about coaching you for better outcomes, coaching you for a future.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the power of coaching, the power of these situations come in, where someone can really help you to see, like, how do I get through to the other side? And this is where I
Mhm.
love Lean, because again, it's going from a place of current state to future state. It's
Mhm.
all related. And
Yeah.
I think finding those people to support mechanisms for you is going to be a huge help. And certainly
I
I see
love
a
it.
big need for that with companies these days. They need more individuals that understand and embrace the power of coaching people through any situation,
Totally.
especially with a lot of the layoffs across the globe.
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, and it takes us back to, being your whole self at work as well, because you may it may be a work driven one with the layoff, but we've also experienced tragic loss over the course of the last few years too. And
Yeah.
um, and some folks had never experienced something like that before. They never had a close family member or friend pass away, and now all of a sudden they've experienced it. And how do I deal with that? And we, you know, all of those things really impact the whole soul. I like to call it the whole soul. And do you think the coping mechanisms, like healthy coping mechanisms, I want to make that clear, healthy coping mechanisms, do you think they broadly work for everyone, or would certain coping mechanisms work for others that don't work for someone else?
I think it depends on the person, right?
Uh,
And defining like what do we mean by coping mechanisms, right?
mhm.
And I think it could be something, for example, I meditate, and that helps me to kind of
Oh,
clear my mind, and especially first thing in the morning. That helps me as I'm going before, a difficult conversation or a difficult
mm,
time. And I think the more that you can find like what works for you,
Mhm.
and whether it's taking advantage of things like the Calm app, or maybe finding solace in nature and just getting outside,
Yeah.
maybe that's a coping mechanism that can help. But finding something that works for you is so important. um,
Mhm.
and I think especially in these times, we have got, like you said, we've gone through such significant change and significant loss
Yeah.
of life, loss of what life was before the pandemic, right? There's
Yeah.
there's there's grief everywhere when you look
Yeah.
at it. But when you look at grief again through the lens of a closure and a new beginning,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
like a rising phoenix, right? Phoenix
Yeah.
always rises, but then falls down, burns to the ashes and then rises up again. I think
Yeah.
if you look at grief through the lens of, closure and a new beginning, then find that coping mechanism that can help
Yeah.
you get from where you are today,
Yeah.
with that loss, that whether it's loss of life, loss of the job, loss of, um, a project, loss of what life was before the pandemic, loss
Yeah.
of your home. I mean, gosh, so much has happened even just around, the globe. I mean, Florida, for my goodness,
Yes.
look at what happened just this past weekend in,
Yeah.
Buffalo, with 77 inches of snow, right?
Yeah.
So there's so much that's happening, but find something that works for you as a
Yeah.
coping mechanism, because I think it is different for different people,
Yeah.
and different personalities.
It makes sense. Well, and different leadership styles work for different people as well. So it makes sense that it would, you know, that mechanisms would be different for different people as well. Do you
Exactly.
find that your work with your consulting and coaching, do you find that that is bleeding into your home life as well?
Oh, I get reminded by my wife Pam all the time, don't coach me, please don't coach me. Frankly, of the two, she's probably the better coach, to be honest with you. She's she's very patient with me, listens extraordinarily well. So I learn a lot from her about what it's like to be a real coach. So I think if anybody of the two is probably the coach, it's her. But it can bleed in. Honestly, I try to let it bleed into my work, with
Yeah,
Neil as well.
that's
And
cool.
and I try to ask people to. I don't want to just like automatically put the coach hat on and it's like permission to play the
Yeah, of
space,
course.
take the hat off of the leader, put the coach hat on. But I think I do find from a work life balance standpoint, I find myself in moments like, I could help her with this if I could only ask this question, but it's even when I was going through my coaching, the master coach that was teaching us our sensei, she's like, don't try this at home. Trust me, don't try.
I've seen that as well.
I can
He says
imagine. I
it
could
to me
totally
all the time. He's like, "We don't need to 5S this, honey.
imagine.
We don't need a process for this. It's fine."
Just get it done, please.
Exactly.
A funny side story. The company that Pam had worked before, they were going through a lean transformation, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, this lean thing. Like, it's just common sense. Do we have to tape everything to the floor? It's just common sense." And she's probably
Amen.
the most organized person I've ever met. I mean, the way that it's hysterical. So yes, it does bleed at home. Don't point it out.
I love it. Well, and to your point, I find that most often the things that are effective in my teaching and coaching as a leader, I learned at home. So
Right, right.
yeah, like interactions with my spouse or interactions with my parents. You know, I think they've taught me the most about leadership than I ever learned from one of my college classes.
Well, that's amazing.
With
That's
how
amazing.
they, my dad is very much the essence of servant leadership. He very much will sacrifice everything to make sure that the individual learns and grows. My mother's the same way, but my mother's also a mental health professional as well. So she comes from the perspective of, we've got to make sure that mental health is okay. So my dad's the engineer. This is logically how we need to handle this. And then my mother is the behavioral side. So I try to take, the best from both of them and try to remember, lean does not have to be so clinical.
Right. That's right.
And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be clinical, especially in today's world. I think if we went back in manufacturing and production from, several decades ago, it was very structured, and the leader told me what needed to happen. And if I didn't make these widgets in this time frame, then I got in trouble. These days, it's very different. It's why weren't you able to make all the widgets in that time frame? Did we, overestimate what could be delivered? Is there something going on at home? Do you need help? So we come at it from a very different perspective than we did, even 2 decades ago, which is incredible.
Yeah, we really do. We really do. And I think it's the inverted pyramid, right? And
yes.
And honestly, our employees are asking more of us.
Yes.
They're expecting more of us as leaders.
Very much so.
Also are the ones asking the questions of us. And I think the more that we can, come with that curious mindset, come with that mindset of taking, your mom and dad's, disciplines, if you will, of the behavior side and the process side, that's the beauty of things, especially, when you look at knowledge workers today.
Yeah.
Because knowledge, is so amorphous. It's so accessible. Everything from, artificial intelligence to what, Muriel's talking about with collaborative intelligence and how we look at things. But I think there's this blend of, again, the mental health aspect, the behavioral aspect, the process of things. It's very different, into your point about how we're asking questions.
Yeah.
So that we're coming with that curious mindset in a place of servant leadership to help and to support, versus to tell. Ask more, tell less.
Yes, thank you. That's brilliantly put. I love it. That marriage is very important in today's climate, for sure. Very much so. Well, my goodness, this hour has flown by.
It hasn't been an hour. Are you kidding me? I knew that it went with you, Michelle. Oh my gosh. Thank you.
And it's so incredible. So we met, goodness, I think it was one weekend in San Francisco.
Yes.
And then we made the connection and we were like, hey, I like the way you think. Let's stay connected.
And we had through it all, and with the various career, I call it Charlie Brown t-shirt that certainly I have, and all the things that you've been so extraordinarily doing in your career and just doing this. My goodness, thank you for this opportunity.
It's so amazing. Just your experience and knowledge and know-how. It's amazing. And I see you doing incredible things with your programs, as well as in your role as COO. I just think it's absolutely amazing. And this has been wonderful. Is there anything that we missed before we say goodbye, I guess?
In the spirit of gratitude, this U.S. Thanksgiving holiday, just want to say thank you. I'm grateful for you. Grateful for this opportunity, and grateful for all the things that you are doing to really impart change in the world through Leanierologist. So
thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you as well. I always learn so much from every single one of our discussions, and I am so grateful for the knowledge that you impart onto me as well. Thank you so much. And I hope this Thanksgiving season is exceptionally good for you and your family and loved ones.
Oh, thank you. Right back at you.
Thank you. So we will chat soon. Hopefully, we can have this happen again sometime in the future.
I can't wait. Oh my gosh, please. I look forward to the next time and just hearing about hey, what has changed since? So
yes, exactly. Because it changes so quickly.
Yes, right.
It's like next week, somebody's going to come up with this amazing new formula and it's going to be like, woo!
And we're going to try it.
Yes, we will. Well, thanks so much, Elaina. It's always wonderful chatting with you, and I'm sure we will speak together very soon.
I can't wait, Michelle. Listen, you take good care of yourself, and thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thanks so much. See you soon.
Bye.